Welcome to Eikon, everyone. My name's Dan, and I'm really excited today. We're kicking off a brand new series called Sense and Sensibility. Now, to really understand why I'm excited as I am, is you got to understand this past month for me and for the staff, for us communicating here. Because if you missed Easter about a month ago, I had this moment. I really shared some vulnerable things in my life. I got really honest, and it was really emotional for me. It was kind of this draining day. And not only that, but then I had to do that service 5 times, over and over and over. And then we were super smart, and we decided right after that to do a series called Confessions of a Pastor over the past 3 weeks, where myself, Kelly, and Steve kind of did the same thing, where we got up and we got vulnerable and talked about things. And man, I just felt so heavy over the past month for the different communicators. I mean, imagine I went to you. Any of you not a real big fan of standing up in front of people and talking? Anybody afraid of public speaking? You hate that? Anybody? All of you? Okay, you are preaching every single week now. I'm dragging you up here and you're doing my job. So both of you. So imagine you had to stand up in front of 500 people throughout 14 different services and just share your deepest, darkest secrets. Something fun like that, right? That's been these past few weeks. And then I realized, oh wait, after that, we have a series where we're gonna talk about money in church. Awesome, this is gonna be so fun. I looked at this and I was like, finally, something easy to talk about like money. So here's the thing, here's why people get kind of uncomfortable in church when they talk about money, because there's this perception. And I used to have this perception that I was kind of afraid to talk about money in church because I felt like, oh man, people are gonna get the wrong idea. People are gonna think that the church, that all they want is the church just wants your money. And honestly, that's not it. We think this is an important issue in our lives, this is something that we deal with on a daily basis. And listen, we're not the first ones to say, listen, it's important to talk about finances, to talk about possessions, talk about money. You know who else thought this? The Bible thought this. Jesus thought this. In fact, for Jesus, more than half of his stories, his parables, dealt with money and possessions. Imagine if every other week, this is all we talked about, right? That's pretty much what Jesus did. And then on top of that, in the Bible, there's about 500 verses on faith. There's a handful of verses about this or about that, but there are over 2,000 verses in the Bible about money and about possessions. It's this is something that's important that we have to talk about. But for so long, because quite honestly, there are some churches that abused this in the past. There are some pastors that have abused this to live a lifestyle that they tried to fund from people giving to the church. And listen, that's wrong, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't address it. That doesn't mean we just don't talk about it, that we pretend like it's nothing to talk about. In fact, over the past few years, I used to have that fear to talk about this because I didn't want people to get this mindset that all we wanted was your money, that we wanted something from you. And that's not it at all. In fact, we don't want something from you. We want something for you. We want you guys to realize this is something that's important, that Jesus says that our finances, our possessions are something that's important. It's something we need to talk about. And we realize that this is an important thing to dive into. This is something that the Bible talked about. And sometimes we get this idea that money can be this bad thing, right? Sometimes people misquote the verse and they say, money's the root of all kinds of evil. And the Bible doesn't say that. It says that the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. But money is neither good nor bad inherently. It can be used for very good things. I mean, think about money as it helps people give a hand up. It helps empower people. It helps sustain our lives. We're able to feed ourselves and our kids because of it. Money can be an incredibly good thing, but it can also be an incredibly bad thing, can't it? I mean, think about corrupt hedge fund managers that tanked our economy because of their greed. Think about corrupt warlords that hoard all their money while their people die and starve. It can be good and it can be bad. Money, much like power, is a force magnifier. It makes you more of who you already are. So if you've sat there before and you've thought I just don't have enough money to be generous. If I just had more, then I would be generous with that. The Bible actually says no. I'm sorry, it just makes you more of whoever you already are. It was Jesus, in fact, that said, Jesus said, he was faithful with little, can be trusted with much. So what Jesus would say, if you've gone around and you've thought before, or you've lived in such a way that it said, once I get a little bit more, then I'll be more generous. Jesus would say, I'm sorry, with the degree that you're faithful with what you have now will be the degree that you're faithful with what you have later. This is something that's really, really important. And Jesus really drives at this point that we've got to be faithful with what we have and with where we're at. But you see, there was this other thing that happened in my mind, realizing that just because it was talking about money in church was abused in the past doesn't mean that we should just avoid it now. There was another kind of paradigm shift that happened in me over the past few years. I always knew this cognitively, in my head. Has there ever been something that you kind of know up here, but it's kind of hard to live out? For me, I knew this truth, but living this out changed everything for me. And it's this truth right here, that Eikon isn't my church, Dan's church. Eikon is your church. This is my job. This is what I'm supposed to do. But it's not Dan's thing. It's not my endeavor. It's yours. You're the church. This is your thing. So today we're going to be talking about some principles that I think can apply to anyone. So if you're in this room right now and maybe you're not a part of this church, maybe you're not even a follower of Jesus, we're going to dive into some just really practical principles that can help you in your financial life. I think they can help everyone here. But then also I want to talk to those of you that do call yourselves followers of Jesus. Those of you that are Christians, and specifically those of you that consider Eikon Church your home church, I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit too, because this is your church. And my question is do you love what's happening? Because I do. I love what you guys are doing. I love how you're serving your community. I love how you enable all these things to happen. Steve talked about just one of those things today in the kids' environments. On top of the environments every single week happening in kids and in youth, there's kids camps that are happening, youth camps, youth retreats. All of these things take funds. And then it takes money to support the people that are leading these things, the staff that are pastoring and shepherding these different ministries. This takes resources. About a week ago, we hosted an event called A Day with Dad, where we brought in different families from people, from children, mothers, who their fathers were inmates at the Kyle Correctional Facility just down the hill. And we said, we want to partner with this organization. We took care of the families up here with our building, let them leverage that. And then they went down and the people helped teach the fathers and gave them some classes and some courses on how to be parents, what it's going to look like when you move back in with these kids and you start to have a life with them again. And then they brought the kids in and they had a special day with their dads. They hadn't got to see you for a while. We were able to do things like that because you give. Because every week as we talk about this, you're enabling those things to happen. We do community-wide events that we invest thousands of dollars in. There are missionaries that we support all around the world that we're giving thousands of dollars to. Those things couldn't happen without you. So my question is do you want those things to continue? What you've been able to experience here at Eikon, do you want other people to be able to experience that? Because if you do, this isn't my thing, it's your thing. And the Bible talks about this thing called the tithe. And basically what the tithe is it's really something for us as Christians we're commanded to do. That we're to give 10% of our income back to God. In a sense, it's kind of putting our money where our mouth is, where we say we trust God. It's like, God, I trust you. And he's like, okay, here's an opportunity. And we're like, well, I don't know about that. And the idea is that it's this percentage giving, that it's even for everyone. It's all of us saying, hey, we're going to give a little bit of what we have back to you, God. We believe it all comes from you. So we're going to return this 10% back to you. And do you know what would happen at Eikon or at churches around the world if all Christians really bought into this? It would be an absolute game changer. Because national statistics say this, that tithers, people that give 10% of their income, make up only about 10 to 25% of a normal church. People giving of their tithe that God kind of commands us to do. And listen, it's not so that God won't be mad at us. We don't tithe to like get on God's good side. We don't tithe to like rub this genie in a lamp and we're gonna get something back if we, tithe just the right amount. No, that's not. It's so that these good things can continue to happen, so that the good news of the gospel continues. On top of that, in the US, about 5% of people in the US actually tithe. 5%. And then 80% of Americans only give 2% of their income. Now, I want you to imagine for a second. I can say this because I kind of know the ins and the outs of our budget because I have to like a Jenga thing, make it work every year. But here's the thing. If even half of our church tithed, it'd be a game changer for us. I mean, at every single thing that we want to do in the community, we could do it in a heartbeat. There are so many things that we have to choose. Hey, do we do this or do we do this? There are times that we make decisions. We say, hey, we're gonna lean into this and we're gonna trust that God's gonna provide. See, as leaders, we're doing what God is asking you to do as well. And we lean in and then we realize that money doesn't come in. So we have to go, okay, do we cut these ministry things? Do we not do this for our community? Do we not do this for the people in our church? If even just 50% of the Christians that call Eikon Church home did this, it'd be a game changer. I mean, absolute game changer. And we believe this is so important and this is something that would change our world. And we believe that it's also something good for you, that as you step out and trust God, God's gonna provide and your faith will grow. We think this is a win-win. Several years ago, we launched something called the 90-Day Tithe Challenge. And what this is we believe that God is faithful. And we believe that his word is true. So when he says, listen, you can trust me in this, that we can actually trust God in this, in our tithe. So I wanna give you an opportunity. I wanna tell you about this tithe challenge. At the end of service, I'll talk about it a little bit more. But basically, we challenge you, if you're not currently tithing, giving 10% of your income, I challenge you, would you trust God just for 90 days? Would you tithe for 90 days and just see what happens? And here's our guarantee, that if after you tithe for 90 days, you commit to it, if you go to eikonchurch.com/give, you'll see something on there. On this website, there'll also be a message that talks real in depth about tithing. I'm gonna move on in just a moment, but really dives into what the Bible says and what God thinks about this. So I wanna encourage you to check out this website. You can sign up there as well. But if you sign up for the tithe challenge, and then you tithe for 90 days, if at the end of those 90 days, you regret it, you go, man, I shouldn't have done that. Man, I shouldn't have trusted in this way. Or man, I didn't think this was gonna happen. If you email us and let us know, hey, I signed up for the tithe challenge. I've tithed for the past 90 days, but it didn't work out for me. I regret it. We'll give you your money back. Say, hey, no strings attached, no questions asked, done, you can have it back. You know why we can do this? Because I believe that we can trust God into this, that we can lean into this. I believe that this isn't something for the church, this is something for you. That at the same time, it will bless your life as it blesses lives through your church. You see, we believe in this. But I don't want to just dive into this because this is primarily for Christians. If you're here and you're not a follower of Jesus, you're not sure about this whole thing, today is also for you. We've got some really practical principles that I'm gonna work through, that I'm gonna talk about, and we're gonna dive into. Because it's so important. Jesus thinks this is so important that if you don't get control of this, in fact, if you don't gain control over your money, the lack of it will control you. If you don't get out in front of this, if you don't gain control over your finances, you will find yourself in a place where the lack of those finances will end up controlling you. And you know why I know this is true? Because I've been there before, right? Come on, we've been here before, right? Where the lack of those things, that we didn't exert real good control. We weren't real wise with our finances at a season of our life. And then we went through a season where the lack of those finances dictated what we had to do and not do, right? You see, we've got to get this under control. So what I'd like to do is I want to give you 3 quick keys, and then we'll kind of wrap this up and give you a couple of challenges. So the first key, the first thing that we've got to do, it's a mindset thing. It's an attitude thing. We've got to get this first. We have to understand that contentment cultivates calm. See, so many of us worry and fret about our finances. So many of us feel this pressure. If you're married, you've probably fought over your finances, haven't you? You've argued over it. You've had, debates, conversations about it. I know you don't fight, I know, right? It's created this, and the first thing that we have to do is we got to get to ourselves to a place of contentment. We say we're content with this. And you see, the Apostle Paul, an early church leader, he talked about this. He talked about contentment and how important this is. Look what he said in a letter to church in Philippi. Paul said this, "Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity." Paul's saying, listen, I've had a lot, and there's been times in my life that I've had very little. And I've learned to be content in both of those scenarios. It's not that either one's bad. I'm not saying you're bad, you're not living right if you don't have a lot of money. No, that's wrong. And I'm also not saying, listen, you're wrong if you have a lot of money, if you have a lot of things, that's wrong. No. The point is that we understand that it's all God's and we're content where we're at. Paul goes on and he says this. He says, in any and in every circumstance, I've learned the secret of being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need. I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Paul says the key to contentment is to keep our eyes on him. To go, I can make it through this season of my life, whether I have a lot or whether I have a little. God, I'm going to keep my eyes on you. And we learn to be content, and that brings this calm to us. That brings us to this place of, I'm going to be okay. I love what Rachel Cruz said. She puts it this way. This is kind of how we get there. In a heart filled with gratitude, there is no room for discontentment. Man, that's good, isn't it? Yeah. See, how do we get to a place of contentment? We learn to be grateful. When our heart is full of gratitude, there's no space for being discontent. A week ago, I had an opportunity. We were in Mexico serving some people there. And there was a time that I'd been there before that we had been on the outskirts of town. Some people that had very little, but yet they were so grateful for the very little that they did have. And it challenged me and the places in my life where I had some discontentment to go, man, I need to be grateful for what I have. I need to understand that God has given me what God has given me. I need to be grateful for that. So once we kind of first get it into our minds, once we get this place of contentment, we say, God, I'm going to keep my eyes on you, whether I have little, whether I have a lot, I'm going to keep my eyes on you. The next thing it has to do is that attitude has to work its way out into our behavior. Because if we're not living it out, if we're not acting this thing out, then we're going to get tripped up. It's one thing to have it up here, but it's got to flesh itself out. So the second key is something that Dave Ramsey, a really popular financial advisor, he says this. He says, you have to act your wage. Act your wage. Have you ever seen anyone that doesn't act their wage? Right? We know those people, right? Right? They try to act someone else's wage, right? They're like living on credit. They're living on borrowed money. They're doing everything they can to act someone else's wage. And this happens to all of us, right? Like that discontentment rises up, the desire to live someone else's wage. Maybe for you, it happens when you're scrolling mindlessly on Instagram and you see someone else's vacation and you're like, oh, wouldn't that be nice, And that discontentment is like, whoop, whoop, whoop. Or like scrolling through on Facebook and you're like, oh, I wish I had that house, but I don't, right? And you're like scrolling through. Or I think one of the worst things in the world is HGTV, right? Right? HGTV, and they're like house hunting, right? And you have that first time home buyer, the 25-year-old couple, and they're like, their budget's like, only $850,000. You're like, who are you? Like, wait, since when did HGTV get like drug lords for first time home buyers? Like, that is not fair. I don't know about you, but I'm going, what kind of job do you have? Like, what do you do on the side to make money? Like, right? And that discontentment grows and we want to act that person's wage, right? And we want to go, man, I want to live that way. I want to do that. And if we're not careful, we can have this right attitude that we go, I know I need to be content, but we don't live it out. We don't practice this. And we start making decisions and we say, man, I can't really afford that. But did you know this store offers 0% interest for 6 months? Maybe with that, I can make little payments on it, right? And we start using tools like credit to afford things, to act someone else's wage. Listen, credit cards should never allow you to live a lifestyle that you want, but just can't afford. Credit cards should never allow you to live a lifestyle that you want, but you just can't afford. So if you really want that furniture, but you just can't afford it, maybe you can't afford it, right? I remember learning this lesson early on in our marriage. Like, we wanted this new, set of furniture, and there was that great 0% down deal, and we made that choice. And it was months and years later that we said, why were we so dumb back then? Right? Like, I was really stupid back then, and we do that sometimes. There's something that we want, but we can't afford. And sometimes we get this idea in our head that like credit is this good thing. And no, you don't understand. I have a rewards card, right? So I'm like going on a vacation someday, right? And listen, credit can sometimes, there are some tools, especially within real estate and different things like that can be tools for creating wealth. But listen, consumer credit is not one of those tools. Cash will always be king, right? When you're using credit, you're actually building someone else's wealth. I guess it can be a tool, like for the creditor, it is a tool for their wealth, absolutely, right? So, but it's never gonna get you there. If you talk to people who have found themselves and they have earned their way and they've become wealthy, they will likely tell you that very same thing. Credit is not the way to get there, especially consumer credit. And this is echoed in the Proverbs and some of the wise sayings in the Bible. In Proverbs 22, it says this. It says, the rich rule over the poor, and the borrower is what? Slave to the lender. When you borrow, you're actually a slave to them. You're at their beck and call. There's no way around this. I love, there's an opera singer, and she has this great quote, and she says this, Beverly Sills says, there are no shortcuts to any place worth going. That place of financial freedom that you want to get there is no shortcut. It will take hard work. It will take effort. It will take you finding yourself in a place of contentment. It will take restraint. So first you have the contentment thing down and you're like, God, I'm going to be content. I'm going to be grateful. I'm going to have a heart filled with gratitude. And then you're learning to act your wage. What then? It's like, okay, great. Then how do I ever get to the place of financial freedom? How do I ever get to a place where I've got some extra? What do I do to get to a place where I can save a lot for my kids or for my retirement? Like, how do I get there? I'm acting my wage. To get there is the third key. It's margin, margin, margin. This is everything. If you have no margin in your financial life, listen, hard times just come, right? Like it just happens. So when hard times come and you have no margin and that engine goes out, guess what you have to do? Like you have to borrow, right? You have to figure it out. You got to sell something. You got to put something on credit. Because you had no margin, then it forces you into a place where you're making poor decisions. Listen, if you fail to plan for the unexpected things in life, you're planning to fail. Because unexpected things in life happen. They just do. You know how I know? Because life, right? Like all of us have been there. We've all experienced the unexpected things, the things that just come up that hit us. And how many of you guys know when it rains, it pours, right? That stupid car that you're like, it might be worth like a couple $1,000, $3,000, and something goes out and it's a few $100s and you're like, fine. You get that fixed and like right after that, like $1,500 and you're like, fine. And then it's like another 15, you're like, why am I doing this? Like when it rains, it pours, it just keeps coming. And if you don't have margin in your life, listen, those things are gonna take you out. So you've got to get to a place where you create some margin in your life. Proverbs 21:20 says, the wise store up choice food and olive oil, but fools gulp theirs down. That it's actually foolish just to gulp down whatever you have. That what a wise person does is they store some aside. So I'm gonna put some aside for a rainy day, for when the bad things happen. I'm gonna have an emergency fund. Something that if something happens, I'm not running to the credit card to put myself into slavery to the lender. Now listen, I'm gonna be wise. I'm gonna set some aside. I'm gonna have some margin in my life. And as you do these things, as you learn to cultivate gratitude and contentment in your heart, as you decide, I'm gonna act my wage. And maybe that means something extreme. Maybe that means we get a smaller home. Maybe we downsize. Maybe we get rid of that new car and the payments and we buy something cash. Maybe you have to make some extreme choices to act your wage that allow you to create margin in your life. You see, these things are important. These things can really change your life. But I realize today I've given you a lot. There's been a lot of things that we've kind of talked about that I've kind of peppered you with, a lot of tools. I want to boil this down. I want to kind of simmer today down to 2 challenges. I have 2 challenges for you today. One challenge is for everyone. It's for every single one of you here today. And then the other challenge is for those of you that consider yourselves followers of Jesus and consider yourselves members. You're a part of Eikon Church. You look at Eikon Church as your home church. Second challenge is for you. The first thing I want to talk about is Financial Peace University. We're going to be launching this. Financial Peace University is a 9-week course where you go through some of these things. You learn to create a budget. You talk about acting your wage. You talk about contentment. And someone works with you. There's a group of people. It's this 9-week course. We do it, I believe, on Tuesday evenings. Yes, see, I know so much. And we'll be starting this here in a few weeks. And I want to challenge you to sign up for this. There have been people that have signed, that this course, the wisdom that they've learned here and the experiences that they go through have changed their lives. There are people here at Eikon that have paid off tens of thousands of dollars worth of debt. I want to highlight one couple. This is Frank and Brandy Coulter. Young couple, pretty newly married. They were there on staff at Vintage Church, the church that we planted in South Austin. And 8 months ago, they went through Financial Peace. A little bit before that, a little more than 8 months ago, they went through Financial Peace University with some friends. They went through this, and they found themselves as a young married couple living in Austin, and Austin ain't cheap. They found themselves in $30,000 worth of consumer debt. And they made a decision, we're gonna live like no one else now so that we can live like no one else later in our lives. They decided to make some radical choices when it came to their finances. They got it under control. And in 8 months, they just paid off last week the last of $30,000 worth of credit card debt. It's amazing. In 8 months, and here's the thing, they're not drug lords like HGTV gets. They're not, I know them, I swear, that wouldn't be on staff if they were, right? They're not arms dealers on the side, right? And I talked to him this week and I'm like, how'd you do it? And he's like, man, honestly, to look back, there were times I don't even know how we did it. We did a few things. We kept trusting God. We continued to tithe. And then we made decisions. They had some side hustles. They started washing dogs as this like side thing. And he said, Dan, I can't believe I made $10,000 washing people's dogs last year, right? Just on the side, they said, what can we do with what we have, with where we're at? I'm going to be content with what I have. But they got aggressive and paid off $30,000 worth of debt in 8 months. They said, man, I would tell everyone to sign up for Financial Peace University. Sign up for this. Do this. This can change your life if you lean into this. We've got a booth set up outside, so after service, you can go out there, talk to Mark, who's gonna be there at the booth, and you can sign up for this class. And listen, it is gonna be an investment. It's $100 to sign up for this. But here's the thing, if you're not willing to invest that into your future, I think if you went to Frank and Brandy and said, do you think that $100 was worth it? I think they'd go, yes, right? Absolutely. Listen, we're not making a dime off of this. This covers your materials, your registration, course fees. It's an investment into your future. Sometimes we have to invest a little bit to really commit to it. Say, I'm gonna show up to all 9 of those weeks because I put $100 into this. So I wanna encourage you to sign up for this. And then the last thing is for those of you who consider Eikon Church your home, I wanna challenge you to sign up for the Tithe Challenge. If you're not tithing in this room and you're a Christian and Eikon Church is your home, listen, it's not that, again, this isn't for us. This is for you. I want to challenge you to take a step of faith, to trust God. It may be more than you've ever trusted God before. Watch Him provide. Because here's what it's going to do. At the same time, I truly, genuinely believe, otherwise I wouldn't commit to saying, hey, if you do it for 90 days and you regret it, we'll give it back. I wouldn't do that if I didn't believe this was really good, this was healthy, this would grow your faith. Then the other thing is, I can't tell you how much of a game changer this would be here at Eikon Church. the things that we want to do in our community. I'm gonna be real transparent. Over the last few months, we've talked about things that we want to do in the fall. And we're wrestling with, can we afford to do that? We want to lean into our community and serve and do some really big things, but it takes finances. And right now, as a team, as a staff, as trustees, we're wrestling with, can we afford to even do that? It would be a game changer for you, for your church, and for your community if we jumped in and we did this. It'd be a game changer. If you're a follower of Jesus and this is your home church, I want to challenge you to pray about this, consider this. You can go right here to eikonchurch.com/give and sign up today. So I'm gonna give it a shot. I'm gonna give it a try. I'm gonna lean in and I'm gonna trust God. So wherever you find yourself today, again, if you're not a Christian, if you're just checking this thing out, I still wanna encourage you, sign up for Financial Peace. If you find yourself in a place where you've got a lot of debt or you don't, it's gonna help you. It's gonna help every single person get a hold of their finances. Listen, Jesus thought this was important. Over half of his stories, his parables were about this. Over 2,000 verses in the Bible talk about finances, wealth, possession. This is an important thing for us to wrap our heads around. Today, I'm not saying this because I want something from you. I genuinely want something for you. Imagine what we could do for our families, for our community, if we really got this under control. We decided to control our finances instead of allow ourselves to be controlled by the lack of it. Amen? Let's pray. God, I thank you so much that we've got this opportunity that we can come and